Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, "Watch me." Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They expressed concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer to that question?
Because I'm the most qualified person in this country to be President of the United States and finish the job I started.
That was CNN's MJ Lee pressing President Biden last night at the White House. President Biden is forcefully pushing back against the special counsel report that characterized his mental clarity as an elderly man with bad memory. The damning 388-page report cleared him of wrongdoing for his handling of classified documents, but it left unanswered questions about the president's mental acuity. And in one portion of the report, the special counsel wrote that Biden did not remember, even within several years, when his son Beau passed away of cancer. Take a listen.
There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that?
Joining me now with the latest is the Hill's Kate Martell. She is the author of the Hill's 1230 report. Kate, I mean, I don't remember in my coverage of President Biden ever seeing such forceful pushback. I mean, it's rare for the public to see that glimpse publicly from President Biden. And clearly, the White House is reeling over the impacts of that special counsel report.
Yeah, it's so clear, Kevin, that President Biden is seething from that special counsel report. I agree that I haven't seen President Biden come out with such force or fire in the belly in quite a long time. And, that might actually be some of the little bit of good news for him that, while this was a very damning report and can hurt him politically, even though it can help him legally, that also at the same time, it really does make it look like he's really has the fire in the belly again. And it's kind of energized him in a way that I think some of his allies have been hoping would come out from him. Watching this clip, it's just remarkable that how much that President Biden is furious about this, that the thing that hurts a presidential candidate the most is something that elevates a weakness that already exists in the campaign. And the biggest weakness for Biden has been his age. And that report hit that squarely on the head. And that's really hard for President Biden to defend himself. It's hard to come out and say, no, my memory is good. That's something that other people need to defend you. You can't defend yourself. And, the fact that President Biden came out and had this impromptu press conferences, Biden doesn't have a lot of press conferences.
Okay, just to that, he rarely has press conferences. I mean, let's be honest. And in fact, last night I was at home and my phone starts blowing up just to give folks a glimpse behind the scenes. That press conference was not planned. I mean, that press conference was not planned at all. And in fact, the Democratic mood in this city, inside the Beltway, went from, quite honestly, them feeling like they were having a strong political day, as so much of the coverage this week was dominated by the Supreme Court case against President Trump. And then virtually, bam. The second that report dropped, it dropped with a large reverberations and political impacts. In one portion of the press conference, though, he actually mixed up the leaders of Egypt and Mexico. Meanwhile, it's all while he's getting criticized for mental acuity. Take a listen.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Cirilli, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in.
Of course, the president of Mexico is AMLO, as we know, and the White House is saying that he misspoke. But Kate, that right there also dominating so much of the conversation here in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, we all have slip-ups, but when you're out there talking about your memory and your mental ability to be president, and in that very same moment, then you have a major slip-up that's really, really hard to defend. That, he, like I was saying, there's only so much you can do to defend yourself about your mental acuity. And President Biden, in having these remarks, this is why President Biden doesn't do a lot of these press conferences. That's why we were saying this is so impromptu, that we don't hear from him off the cusp very often. And when you do, you have moments like this, and it just elevates the storyline of how fit is he to be president? And, a lot of people will say this just originates as a media storyline, but this comes from voters all over the country. Whenever I talk to voters about President Biden, the first thing that people bring up is his age, that people may agree or disagree with him politically and on policy issues, but his age is something that he can't escape. And you see these comments, and it just only further adds to that storyline.
And for Trump world, they're hesitant to raise the age issue because, let's also be honest, Trump and Biden are essentially the same age. But in terms of what you were saying about the mental acuity and conversations about that, I was speaking to Democrats this morning who were saying, why would he give a press conference just on the special counsel report, and why not give a press conference specifically in prime time, for example, on the foreign policy strategy to showcase what he's doing as a commander-in-chief? So again, more criticism being lobbed, quite honestly, within Democratic circles in Washington against the White House press office, and that they have not been able to consistently get out front of messaging here in Washington, D.C., and that that's had impacts throughout the country. Meanwhile, heading back over to the Supreme Court, they appear poised to give Trump a big win in the Colorado case. What do we know, Kate Martell?
Yeah, yesterday watching the Supreme Court oral arguments were fascinating because President Trump's lawyer came in, did not have the usual strategy of hyperbole and stuff, had a very, I think, standard legal argument that was well received within the Supreme Court, that, it was almost looking like this ruling in Colorado might be overturned and Trump would appear on the ballot. And I think the reason why is we didn't hear January 6th get brought up very often during these oral arguments. I think what the justices seem worried about is the political implications and the legal chaos of the Supreme Court deciding who can be president. So that seems to be the biggest legal argument that is gaining ground among the Supreme Court justices. And that's only going to, I think, help Trump. So from everything we're hearing, yes, this is only a case in Colorado, but there are pending cases in a number of other states. And from everything that I'm hearing, that whatever the Supreme Court decides in Colorado will likely dictate all of these other cases in other states.
Yeah, that's an important point right there. And Trump, of course, is in Pennsylvania on the campaign trail, Biden's territory, that Biden won in 2020, but Trump won in 2016 for the first time since the 1980s. A Republican had won Pennsylvania. So you've also got an interesting senator there, John Fetterman, pivoting to the middle from the far left of his party. And Trump has had a past few days on the trail. And so specifically in a state like Pennsylvania, how is this all going to play out?
Yeah, I expect to see Trump in a very good mood, very good spirits after that special counsel report and after, I'd say, a pretty good day for him in the Supreme Court. And like you said, Pennsylvania is very much a swing state. That it's a state that Trump does want to put his efforts in. So I'm expecting to see him hopefully in better spirits than I saw after winning the New Hampshire primary, where he seemed pretty angry, honestly. But I think that coming off of this type of news in a state like Pennsylvania, I'm expecting to see, the Trump rewind, the 2016 fired up Trump more so than we were seeing, I'd argue, over the past few weeks and, probably months to year.
I want to head back to Capitol Hill for a second because House Republicans are trying to impeach Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Of course, they failed this week. Now Steve Scalise is heading back into town. Can they do it next week?
They're going to try. It's, I think, still very, very tight whether they could actually impeach Mayorkas. But, I just think that we saw this past week of how tough the dynamics are for Speaker Johnson in his party, that he only has such few Republican votes over Democrats that the vote would be incredibly tight. So it's still possible it could happen. But as we've seen, he has a hard time controlling the party because there are so many factions within the House Republican Party. So it's definitely not a given, but they did surprise us this week. So the surprises keep happening.
Who's your political MVP of the week, Kate Martell?
Political MVP. I'm actually going to say Trump this week because he came out with a pretty good week, and he didn't even have to do it with the Supreme Court. That was on his lawyer's behalf, and with the special counsel report on Biden, 2 wins that he didn't actually have to manipulate or do personally, and I think he actually probably came out on top this week.
Lamar Jackson is the NFL's MVP. How's that for a pivot? My friends in the control room. The 27-year-old Baltimore Ravens quarterback is the youngest 2-time NFL MVP. Are you going to watch the big game? Obviously, it's the Chiefs and the 49ers. Are you going to be watching the game this week? Come on, give me some 12:30 community engagement video, Kate Martell.
I'm just going to say that I definitely don't have on my computer screen over here who is in the Super Bowl 2024 to confirm. So I can't believe you're asking me about this. But I will say that, yes, I'm going to watch this game, not just because of Taylor Swift, but it definitely does make me a little bit more excited for it. But always in for the snacks. I'm making buffalo chicken dip and a recipe
I was telling our producer, Jeff Reiber, the same thing. I said, what you got to do is you take the chicken in the crock pot, you put Philly cream cheese in it, and then you put hot sauce, and then you put a lot of cheese. A lot of cheese. You let it go overnight. You put that thing in Saturday night. That's what we call a Kev recipe right there, Kate Martell.
Of course, you would say that Philly cream cheese, but I agree.
There you have it. Buffalo chicken dip. Kate Martell, 1230 Report. Thank you as always for breaking that down. No one does it better. Make sure to click and subscribe to Kate's excellent newsletter, 1230 Report. The Senate advanced a $95 billion foreign aid bill Thursday, providing aid for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan.
Slimmed down version that would still do a tremendous amount of good.
The stripped-down version passed in a 67-32 vote a day after Republicans had rejected the original bipartisan border security and foreign aid package. The bill will now go to the House, which, as Republican Senator John Cornyn acknowledged, may not be an easy sell for House Speaker Johnson and fellow GOP lawmakers.
He's got a heavy lift, but that doesn't change the fact we have a job to do here.
Israel hit on the southern city in Gaza, Rafah, with new airstrikes overnight into Friday, per the Associated Press, despite the Biden administration's warning against expanding its offensive. In a statement Friday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the Israeli Defense Forces to evacuate civilians in Rafah, the last major population center in Gaza, where the IDF has not yet occupied. Gaza is home to more than 1.3 million people, and according to the Hamas health ministry in Gaza, the death toll has climbed to more than 28,000. Another busy week in Washington. Let's take a look back at some of the biggest headlines.
In watching the Supreme Court today, I thought it was a very beautiful process. I hope that democracy in this country will continue.
The Supreme Court signaled reluctance to keep former President Donald Trump off the 2024 ballot. The highest court has taken up the Colorado case after it became the first state to attempt removing Trump from its primary over the Capitol riot. State officials cited the insurrection clause in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. But this is not a case about whether January 6th was Trump's fault. This is a case about the process of states' ballots and who can be on the ballot.
If you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you. Because I do not want you to solve this during the presidential election. By the way, they have been faithful to their promise.
The bipartisan Senate border bill collapsed, and House Republicans failed to find enough votes in their own caucus to impeach Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The legislative congressional battles illustrate how both congressional chambers are not only sharply divided, but so closely divided. The failure of the bipartisan border bill, which Republicans, including former President Donald Trump, assailed as not going far enough to protect the border. It all but now guarantees that any significant reform to the U.S.-Mexico border will have to wait until after the election, despite President Biden urging lawmakers to do something. Hamas has sent a generally positive response to a draft proposal over the release of hostages and even to halt fighting. But Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shut it down. 5 U.S. Marines were found dead in the mountains near San Diego. According to the authorities, the Marines were killed in a helicopter crash during a routine training exercise. President Biden said in a statement that he and the First Lady are heartbroken by the loss of life. Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell says interest rates will likely remain unchanged in March.
You could, or you could just halt the progress. I think more likely, if you move too soon, you'd see inflation settling out somewhere well above our 2% target.
In an interview with CBS News 60 Minutes that aired Sunday, Powell signaled no additional cuts will come next month and explained why the Fed is wary of slashing rates too soon. Democratic presidential hopeful Marianne Williamson suspended her 2024 campaign.
I read a quote the other day that said that sunsets are proof that endings can be beautiful too.
The long-shot candidate placed a distant third place in Tuesday's Nevada primary, getting just 3% of the vote. She launched her bid last February, becoming the first challenger to Biden in the Democratic primary. She also sought the presidency in 2020. India detained a pigeon for 8 months on suspicion that the pigeon was spying on behalf of China. According to PETA India, the bird was released from captivity this week after Indian officials apprehended the suspected flying foe when they found illegible writing on the pigeon's wings. But it turned out it was no avian agent, just a Taiwanese racking pigeon. That's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.